Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to my English learning with me, Mrs. Arum. Well, my students, for this meeting, we still learn about historical recount text. And for the last meeting, we have discussed about it. Do you still remember? What is historical recount text, my students? Good. Historical recount text is a text that tell us about the history in chronological sequence, right? So, we focus about the history. Then, let's discuss about the generic structure of recount text. 1. Orientation. It is about introducing the participants, place, and time of the story. And please you remember, my students, this is always in the first paragraph of the text. We can say that this is as the opening of the story because this is introduced about the participants, place, and time of the story, right? 2. Events. In this part, the writer tried to describe a series of events that happened in the past. Or we can say that, my students, for this part events here, we can say that this is as the main content of the story because this part the writer described a series of events that happened in the past. Yeah, so series, it means that like chronological, right? On the part events here, the writer can develop into some paragraphs. It depends on how many events that the writer would like to present to the readers. 3. Reorientation. It is optional, stating personal comment of the writer to the story. Because it is optional, so it depends on the writer want to write reorientation or not. And it is always in the last paragraph of the text. Now, my students, let's discuss or analyze the generic structure of recount text. Please attention, my students. This is the example of historical recount text, Bandung as a Fire. From the first paragraph here, my students, we can say that this is orientation part, right? So, we can see and we can find the participants of the story, the place, and the time of the story. The participants of the story are 200,000 residents of Bandung, and then the event happened in Bandung on March 24, 1946. Then, the second paragraph here, we call this as events part. In this part, the writer tried to describe the events that happened in the past about Bandung as a Fire. In the part of events here, the writer can develop into some paragraphs because in this part, the writer described about the event that happened in the past. So, we can see from the text here, my students, there are two events. The second paragraph as the first event and then the third paragraph as the second event. After paying attention to the explanation, now we are going to do the exercise. Task 1. Listening section. Complete the blank sentences with the appropriate word that you hear. The Battle of Ambarawa was a battle between the recently created Indonesian Army and the British Army that occurred between 20 October and 15 December 1945 in Ambarawa, Indonesia. On 20 October 1945, Allied troops under the command of Brigadier Bader landed in Semarang to disarm Japanese troops. Initially, the troops were welcomed in the area, with Central Java's governor Wongsonegoro agreeing to provide them with food and other necessities in return for the Allies' promise to respect Indonesian sovereignty and independence. However, When Allied and Niger troops began freeing and arming free Dutch posts in Ambarawa and Magelang, many locals were angered. Indonesian troops under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Sarbini began besieging Allied troops stationed in Magelang in preparation for their attempted disarmament. In the morning of 23 November 1945, Indonesian troops began firing on Allied troops stationed in Ambarawa. A counterattack by the Allied forced the Indonesian army to retreat to the village of Badono. On 11 December 1945, Sudirman had a meeting with the various commanders of the Indonesian army. The next day at 4:30 a.m., the Indonesian army launched an assault on the Allies in Ambarawa. Indonesian artillery pounded Allied positions, which were later overrun by infantry. When the Semarang-Ambarawa highway was captured by Indonesian troops, Sudirman immediately ordered his force to cut off the supply routes of the remaining Allied troops by using a pincer maneuver. The battle ended 4 days later on 15 December 1945, when Indonesia succeeded in regaining control over Ambarawa and the Allies retreated to Semarang. Next exercise. Task 2. Listen to the following historical recount text. The Proclamation of Indonesian Independence was read at 10 a.m. on Friday, August 17, 1945. The declaration marks at the start of the diplomatic and armed resistance of the Indonesian national revolutions, fighting against the force of the Netherlands and pro-Dutch civilians until they officially admitted Indonesia's independence in 1949. The Netherlands declared that they had decided to accept the fact that on August 17, 1945 marks as Indonesia's Indonesian independent date. Meanwhile, the United Nations, who mediated on the conflicts, officially admitted the Indonesian independence on December 27, 1949. The document was signed by Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta in the following day as they were president and vice presidents. After listening to the text, please answer the questions. Number 1. What is the appropriate title of the text? Number 2. What time was the proclamation read? Number 3. When the United Nations admitted the Indonesia independence? Number 4. Who signed the document? Number 5. When was the document signed? How to answer? 1. Follow my IG account, Arum Mujahidah. 2. Write your answer on your book, then upload on your IG. Don't forget to tag my account, Arum Mujahidah. Then copy the URL. 3. Confirm your answer by sending a message to my WhatsApp, name, space, class, space, copy of URL. I think that's all. See you next meeting. Always be spirit to study. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.